When I was a young teenager, around 13 or 14, my cousin Judy and her family had rented a home on the Tennessee and Georgia line. This was a huge house with plenty of bedrooms for Judy and her 4 siblings. It had a wraparound porch and 3 fireplaces. It was a gorgeous old home, probably built in the early 1920s, if not earlier, and there were huge oak and maple trees complete with tire swings in the front yard. Judy, who was 2 years older than me, instantly hated that house. She said that it scared her. Her mother passed it off as that adolescent dislike of anything and everything. After about a month in that house, Judy had changed. She was always sleepy and cranky, always jumpy, and looking over her shoulder as if she were scared. When I asked her what was wrong, she insisted that it was the house. She said that there were strange voices, odors, and unexplainable movement from furniture at night, that she was almost unable to sleep at all. When I tried to be rational, she snapped at me and demanded that I go and see for myself. That night, I arrived with a small tape recorder and blank cassette tape, something one of my classmates told me to do, and readied myself for bed. Just after 11 p.m., I awoke to the sound of fingernails tapping rhythmically on a wooden table. Figuring it was just Judy trying to save face, I rolled over and went back to sleep. A short time later, the radio alarm clock sounded, blaring some static-filled rock tune. I turned it off, thinking again that it was just Judy pulling another prank. Later still, I awoke freezing cold. All of the blankets were piled at the foot of the bed. Judy was sitting with her back to the headboard, and her knees curled up under her chin, and her arms wrapped around them. She was staring glazed eyes at the dresser mirror, where there was this faint, fog-like mist reflecting in it. Again, thinking it was all Judy's doing, I gathered up the covers and went back to bed. Finally, very late in the night, I was again awakened to the sound of someone calling my name. It was very distinct and not something Judy could pull off, especially considering she lay next to me sound asleep. I shook her awake, and she heard it too. We sat there listening for what felt like hours. Then it just stopped, and there was an uneasy stillness in the room. The bedroom door slammed shut, and the dresser drawers opened and slammed closed of their own accord. A guttural growling sound filled the entire room, getting louder and louder until it was echoing throughout the house. When it finally subsided, we could hear beating and knocking on the bedroom door. It took us a few moments to realize that it was Judy's mom trying to get into us. When her mom finally got in, Judy and I were in tears. Somehow the door had locked itself, and it was one of those old locks that require a skeleton key to lock or unlock. Her mom wanted to know what we had been doing to cause such a ruckus. When we began to tell her about all of the odd events, she shushed us and emphatically stated that there are no such things going on in this house. No sooner she had gotten the words out of her mouth, the rocking chair in the living room just outside of Judy's bedroom began rocking. I mean, rocking so violently that it was pounding the floor. After that, the kitchen and living room lights began to flicker on and off. Judy and her family moved from the house the very next day. The day after Judy and her family moved, one of her brothers found the tape recorder and began listening to the tape. There were at least 3 different voices heard, and no one could decipher what languages the voices were speaking in. Judy threw that tape in a brush fire after listening to it, and said that those sounds were the sounds she had been hearing since day 1. On a side note, that tape recorder never worked again. When my dad took it to a repair shop, they could not find a thing wrong with it. It simply would not work. I'd forgotten about that night in that house until this past weekend. My spouse and I were driving around, looking for a place to hunt, when we stopped at a four-way stop. A chill came over me, and my feet began to burn as if I was suddenly standing on hot coals. I felt lightheaded, nauseous, and weak when he said, "Man, look at that house. It's like staring at us." Gives me the heebie-jeebies. When I looked to my left, there it was, like a nightmarish blast from a long-forgotten past. I called Judy when we got home and told her about seeing that old house. Judy, now almost 35, was extremely upset about the mention of that house. She made it very clear that she did not want to discuss that house or anything that went on beyond its doors, and she made me swear to never bring it up to her ever again. From 2001 to 2003, my grandma and I lived in a house in Boonville, Missouri. The house was my uncle's, but it used to be a duplex, so my grandma had one side, he had the other, and I had the upstairs that went from his side up. First, I have to say that the house always felt weird. It used to be a vet's office, and between the two halves of the house, there's a little hallway about 3.5 feet long with a door on her side, a door on his side, and a door to the basement. The doors in the house stuck at some times of the year. It wouldn't stay shut the other part of the year. This was the part of the year that they wouldn't stay shut. They just swung all the way open. I went downstairs to go talk to my grandma, and when I went into the hall, both doors slammed shut. The basement door, which always latched very well and stayed latched, started to swing open and stopped at about 1 inch. I know it was about 1 inch because my hand was on the door. There was a really cold draft coming from the crack in the door, and our basement wasn't that cold around that time of year. I screamed and started banging and pushing on all 3 doors. It was pitch black in there. There wasn't a light. And finally, the basement door shut quickly, and both doors just swung open. I went in and told my grandma, and she said she heard the door shut and thought it was weird, but didn't hear me screaming. Another time, we had been gone all day, and so had my uncle. We didn't have a big ladder, and no one around there had seen anyone on our roof. I went upstairs and walked into the bathroom, which was right across from a window. I paused for a couple seconds, then turned around. The window, frame and all, were lying on the floor. There were a couple marks on the wall where the corners hit as if it was falling down, and there were linters of wood all over the floor. We checked, and there weren't any pry marks, and no marks outside, and no handprints on the window like someone had pushed it. My uncle still thinks I somehow pried it off the wall. That is the window he kept telling me to keep shut. I tried, but it was one of those windows that opens from the top and leans in. Every time I shut it and locked it, it would come open. He slammed it shut, and the next time it was open was when the window fell off the wall, as we put it. There are other things that happened in that home. Almost all of it happened upstairs. The locked doors would pop unlocked, open, shut, then relock themselves. If I put too many things on top of the filing cabinet in the corner of my bedroom, it would shake violently until some stuff fell off. When anyone went up or down the stairs, something grabbed your ankles about halfway and even tripped you. I had a particularly nasty fall down the stairs one time. The closet doors in the hallway would open and close slowly sometimes. The stairs came up in the middle of the hallway, and there was a walkway all the way around. The side that no one ever walked on had really cold spots. A couple of things that happened that were not upstairs one time. I had my door open and was just laying there thinking, and I saw something come from my upstairs living room and walk down the stairs ever so slowly. I followed it down the stairs on my rear end so I didn't get tripped and through to my grandma's side of the house. My grandma started talking when it was still in the shadows. She thought she was still talking to me, and I was still in her kitchen. When I ran in there, she stopped and asked if I was standing there. Who was in the shadows? I told her. That was her first experience with a ghost. Also, all of the time, it seemed that the house was listening and watching everything, even from the outside. All in all, that was a very active house, and I'm glad I don't live there anymore. We moved into our house in August of 2001. We first realized we had a ghost when I was sitting on the toilet, and the toilet paper in front of me suddenly and very quickly began to unroll into a perfect pile on the floor. This happened once to my husband also. Soon it began. Here are some of the things we have experienced with our ghost. We have a woman who died in her son's room. Her name is Della. We know this from buying the house from her nephew. And we have a male ghost, but we do not know who he is. Her son will sit in the game room and turn his stereo on. It will turn off. He will get up and turn it back on. It will turn off again. He finally, after a while, gets frustrated and just leaves it off afterwards. Once my husband was plugging in the television in the game room, and he felt a breath on his neck and heard a female voice say, "Too hot." We do not know what she meant by that. Her son was sitting in the upstairs TV room one day. We have a bookshelf in this room. On the top shelf were 2 tall candles and plants. The candle came up over the plants, across the middle of the floor, and hit him on his knee. One evening, my husband and I were the only ones home, and we had heard a crash in the kitchen. One of our glasses had come out of the top cabinet and smashed into the middle of the kitchen floor. One morning we woke up, and the kitchen stool, which had been under the table at the end of the kitchen, was in front of the stove, as if Della had been sitting there, watching something cook. We had several people over, and videotaped the comforter on her bed, being straightened by invisible hands. Also, at this time we asked, "What are you doing here?" A male voice whispered, "Watching." That is when we realized we had not only had Della in this house, but a male ghost as well. We have had on numerous occasions the smell of baking bread, and no one was baking bread. According to her nephew, she died in her son's bedroom in the month of June. The first June that we were there, we had approximately 7 times that the police would call and say that they just received a hung-up 911 call. After a while, we figured out who was doing it and removed the telephone from that room. It never happened again. One summer evening, my husband was in the backyard. When I walked out, he asked, "Where's my beer?" I did not know what he was talking about. He said he thought it was me walking through the kitchen, and he had yelled up for me to bring a beer. I had not been upstairs. I was down in the laundry room. Her son took a picture with his camera cell phone of a dark figure of a man sitting at her desk in front of the computer. We have things like our shoes being upstairs and ending up downstairs, just small things like that being moved. And finally, we can hear someone walking around upstairs when we are downstairs in the game room. It has just become our way of life. They are like part of the family. We don't even consciously notice half of the stuff happening anymore. One of the most horrifying incidents, though, occurred one night while sound asleep. My husband had been sleeping in another room at the time, when I could have sworn I heard faint screams coming from the room he was sleeping in. Although the screams sounded faded and far away, the tone still sounded as if people were being buried alive. Naturally, I rushed to my husband's assistance in the event that he may be in trouble. Fortunately, he was completely fine, but before I could turn back completely and head back into the hallway and into my room, I saw a shadowed figure zip past me from the corner of my eye. I decided, at that point, that I was going to stay with my husband until the morning arrived. I was too scared to go back to the other room, to go back to bed. Hey, my name is Kelly, and I know that this experience is a bit short, but it's also a life-changing story that I'll always remember for the rest of my life. I used to frequently visit this young girl who I became a babysitter for. Her parents' house was a typical American dream type home, nestled inside a friendly subdivision of similar looking homes with white picket fences, perfectly manicured lawns, etc. One specific occasion, I was watching that girl play around in the front yard. It was late night, and I know it wasn't the smartest thing to do to let a child play around outside in the yard, but I was watching her, and the neighborhood was always very safe. I think it was about 11:30 p.m. at night when this whole event occurred. The streets had been empty. Absolutely nobody was out there but me and this little girl. That was when I noticed a man aimlessly wandering down the street just in front of the house. Since I was so focused on paying attention to the little girl, I didn't really notice him pop into my field of vision until he passed us by. This was an older middle-aged man with tattered clothing, looking completely out of place in a neighborhood that wouldn't even have these types of people wandering on the streets. He looked delirious and was walking slowly. He didn't seem to turn to us or even recognize that we were on the lawn. He just kept walking. Immediately, I grabbed the girl and ran back into the house and locked the door. I decided to look through the drapes when I noticed the man had disappeared on the street. It didn't make much sense to me because the man was walking so slowly and I'd just seen him the second before. I asked the little girl if she'd seen the man I'd seen, and before I could even finish my sentence, I heard a soft knock at my door, my heart pounding. I was too scared to even look through the hole to see if it was that man, but I did anyway. Oddly enough, there was nobody there. I ended up telling the family of the girl, and of course called the cops. They came over and told me to be careful, and that they would do their best to patrol the area in case they see a suspicious man outside. Later on, I thought that it could be possibly a ghost, though I'm not sure, but it does certainly seem like it. Another night I was out playing with this little girl when it started to storm shortly after. Her parents were home this time, but I liked to bond with the kid. My mom called me and told me she wanted me to come home so I wouldn't be out in the middle of the storm. The drive is probably about 10 minutes at the most, back to my house. As a side note, a friend of mine's house that was killed in a car accident is on my way home. As I was driving past, I got this urge to look at the house, and in the yard of this house, there was this fog presence. It wasn't just a light mist either. It was a completely darkened cloud. What completely shocked me, though, was that I swear it had some sort of definition or defined shape. It had the build of a person, but as I said, was still a dark cloud. I saw it for about 5 seconds, then it disappeared. It scared the crap out of me, because nowhere else around had any kind of fog. It definitely seems that this area has a lot of supernatural energy, and I'm not sure why. Thanks for reading, though. I wanted to share a story that proves that love continues, even after death. My son and his wife, who live in another state, were expecting their first baby in the first part of December. My 80-year-old mother couldn't wait for the baby to be born. She was so excited. Every time I talked to her, everything would be about the baby. In mid-October, Mom suddenly fell ill and was hospitalized. My son and his wife came down and spent a lot of time with Mom in the hospital, making plans for the baby, etc. On November 5th, Mom died. My beautiful granddaughter was born December 1st. It was named after her great granny. It was very bittersweet, as we loved the baby more than anything, and so glad she was healthy. But it was very sad knowing how much Mom wanted to see her. Well, death did not keep Mom from seeing her first great-grandchild. While in the hospital, my daughter-in-law was alone in the room with the baby, kind of dozing in and out. Suddenly, she felt something nudge the end of her bed. She looked up and saw Mom at the foot of her bed, smiling at her. About this time, the baby started to fuss. My daughter-in-law watched in awe as Mom glided across the room to the baby and started rubbing her back. The baby immediately quieted down, and Mom slowly faded away. The baby is now a month old, and my daughter-in-law says that now that they are home, the house will start to feel different, and the baby acts like someone is playing with her. I think we know who our guardian angel is. As a side note, yes, the story is 1000% authentic. I know maybe people might not believe it, but obviously it happened, and I have the proof to back it up, at least in my heart. It's not the scientific proof that everybody wants, but it did happen. I believe in ghosts. I'm certain of it. Hey guys, it's Phantomofdarkness. Remember when I said I was going to take you on a journey if you didn't read the community post or didn't follow me on social media? Twitter and Facebook. Well, Facebook I'm not really active at all, so don't follow me on Facebook. But Twitter. I was about to say Facebook again, but no, we're not going to go down that road. Anyway, the road we're going to go on is commenting, liking, share, and subscribe. You know, the greatest thing about sharing my work is that if people haven't seen my work before, they'll be able to share the excitement they have for ghost stories. Remember guys, this is 100% ghost stories. Nothing but ghost stories, paranormal activity, and anything of the above. Wait, that doesn't make any sense, but you know what I mean. So, I know there's gotta be more people who appreciate ghost stories, a good ghost storytelling, you know? So if you're on the streets, or if you're on the bus, or if you're driving in the car and you're listening to this, you're like, you see a homeless man on the street, you gotta share that video and be like, hey homeless man, I'm gonna share you something that'll make you crack up, or make you so terrified. And then tell him to subscribe. Tell him to go to a library or something, because I know sometimes, you know, homeless people, they go to a library and they, that's how they get their access to the internet. And then the homeless person from there is going to talk to another person, and they're just going to connect, and everybody's going to share the stories, and we're going to share the videos and enjoy the entire video for the rest of our lives. So that's what sharing does. You know, social media, global. Even people who are less fortunate can watch and enjoy it, and I'm an asshole. Sorry guys, I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. Story 3, I love that so much. Let me know in the comment section below which story that you love the most. Story 3 has got to be my favorite. I'm not trying to influence you, but story 3, story 3, story 3. So with that guys, good night, good morning. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.